Well, hello and welcome to the Wednesday Night Grumpy Sound Guy show. In this episode, we are going to talk about power. Basically AC power, alternating current power. The power that comes out of your wall, the power that powers your refrigerator or little pizza oven or sound system. You know, but if you're a fat guy like me, you can appreciate a good pizza oven. So stick around. You don't want to take off. You don't want to miss a second of today's show. We're going to dive into how to make your sound system work best for you by providing proper power. See you in a minute. Your Grumpster here, Mr. J.R. Everhart. I just wanted to remind you to please subscribe to the channel. And we just started last week the join feature. You can join and be a member of this channel. That way you can financially support this content for about the price of a cup of coffee. It's cheap, guys. Trust me. I kept it low for a reason so you guys don't complain and lose your minds. But we are working on content that's getting funneled to the member side as we speak. And there's going to be all kinds of live chat stuff that's going to happen over there. You're going to get discounts on merch, all that stuff. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. That's free. Hit that notification bell so you'll get a notification every time I post a video. And join the membership of the Grumpy Sound Guy movement. And let's make the world a better place. One mix at a time, one gig at a time. I'll see you. And welcome back. Welcome back. My name is J.R. Everhart from CLP Audio and Staging. I am your Grumpy Sound Guy, and I had a guy. I'm assuming it's a guy. I'm pretty sure it's a guy. I'm 83.4% sure it was a guy that asked this question. He had seen the little power breakout box here in the background, and had asked me to do an episode on power. So I've kind of touched on this in the past. We've had some conversation about how crappy club power is and venue power is and all that kind of stuff. And we'll tell some of those stories as well, today. But, this is a part of middle market sound reinforcement that I think a ton of guys get wrong, because it's the most overlooked thing in what we do. Most guys are thinking, power in terms of power amps and how much power they can throw to their speakers, or how much the plate amplifiers are in the back of their, powered boxes that they're using for front of house and monitors and things like that. They're not thinking about AC power, the power that's coming out of the wall, the power, the electricity that you need for your equipment to run correctly. Audio equipment in general is pretty tolerant, especially modern amplifiers and stuff like that, is pretty tolerant of dirty power. And when I say dirty power, I mean power that's not 100% consistent at giving you 120 volts every time you plug it in, or 124. In some cases, I was at a place the other day, it had 126. I was like, holy cow, that's hot. But man, the gear was loving it. The gear was eating it up. Then the other side of it is I've seen audio equipment run on as low as like 105 volts. That's definitely a borderline place. You're definitely going to have brownout situations. We're going to talk a lot about brownout today. So you just never kind of know what you're getting into from club to club. What I try to do, now I'm passive, not like... Not passive in my personality, but passive in the type of systems that I use. I mostly use passive systems. I have one small little active rig that I use for like talking heads or super small corporate gigs that I can fit into the pickup and run to downtown DC or Baltimore and do a corporate gig. But other than that, 98.4% of my inventory is all passive speakers, and we have multiple amp racks. We have one, two, three, at least 4 different amp racks just right here on the property right now. So that requires, correct power. So my kind of rule of thumb when I go into a club is I always want to get the subs on their own circuit, because subs is what's going to draw the hardest from the wall, is going to draw the hardest, from your AC source. So if I'm in a club where they're only providing, 120 outlets, and that sort of thing, I will run a 50-foot down the wall, or try to get on a separate wall. Usually the way they wire buildings is each wall has its own circuit. So if you have 3 walls, you should have 3 circuits, 3 separate circuits there. Now, if you have a venue that at least halfway tried to set the stage up correctly for the bands, they may have 2 circuits on the upstage wall. That's great. I honestly like to have 4 circuits. That's what I want when I go everywhere. That way I have a circuit for the subs, I have a circuit for the tops and monitor wedges, amp, and then I have 2 circuits for stage power. Now I will a lot of times run depending on how much stage gear there is, a lot of times I'll run my control rack, which has my mixer and wireless microphones in it, off the same circuit as the top amp and the monitor wedge amp. It just all depends. If the band is mostly direct and they don't have a whole bunch of amps on stage, I may tie that control rack into one of the circuits on stage. I like to have at least 1 circuit at upstage and 1 circuit downstage. That seems to do it. If you get into like A-band riders or B national riders, that are telling you this is what they require, they typically will want 4 circuits on stage, 1 on each corner of the stage. When I'm doing festival stuff, that's exactly how we wire our stage at festival stuff. We put a circle on each corner. Usually we probably put 3 circuits across upstage and 2 circuits at downstage. That's typically what we do. And then we have I have actually 3 of these breakout boxes here. Right there it is. The breakout boxes, I have 2 in the truck, and then this is just a spare that I keep in the shop. I run them under my stage at festivals, and I'll run 1 that has 6 circuits on that box. I'll run 1 just to the stage, and then I'll run another one to lighting. Now the lighting's all LED. It doesn't take a whole lot of power. If I need to grab another circuit off that spider box, I will. Like if I have to run 2 4-channel monitor amps, then I'll probably rob a circuit off that lighting box and run it over to the second monitor wedge amp so that everything is getting enough power. I have 2 4-channel amps that are both I think one of them is about 2,500 watts per channel at 8 ohms. And I think the other one is probably about 3,000 watts per channel at 8 ohms. So, that gives me plenty of power to, what I'm trying to do. But in a club situation, if we have 2 circuits on the back, great. I'll use one of those for monitor amps. If they're ears, that's great. I'll just plug the control rack into that. I'll use the other one for stage gear, upstage gear. And then on this wall, I will use that circuit for downstage. And then on this wall, I'll use that circuit for the sub amp. And then everything is behaving the way it's supposed to behave. Now, let me tell you a little secret that most of you guys do not know, and I know you don't know it because I see it happening all the time. If you're running external power amps, I think this applies even on your active speakers, you should never run any power amps through any kind of power conditioner. Now I know I can hear you guys yelling at me now. What are you talking about? I need protection, on my amps and blah 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 and this, that, and the other. Dude, I don't even care if it's like a $500 monster, power conditioner that's supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. You are not supposed to run any of that through there. The circuit breaker on that entire unit, like you take a PL8 Furman rack mount, power conditioner. That circuit breaker in that unit's only 15 amps. You want your amps at least on 20 amp circuits. You know, like my sub amps, if I start hammering them hard, they will hit 17 amps. You know, they typically are cruising around 12 or 13 amps, but I have talked to Crown on the phone, to the techs at the factory, you know, the shiznit, like the guys that are in the trenches of Crown manufacturing, and they have told me that these amps are built to correct for dirty power. These amps are built to be able to handle whatever you throw at them that way. If it's not, you know, enough power or something like that, they'll just shut down. Usually when you underpower gear, it typically gets hot, so then your amp may go into thermal, which means it will shut down until it cools down enough to restart, you know, and that could be the longest 30 seconds of your life if it's in the middle of a show. The more power you throw to it, usually the cooler it's going to run. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to you guys just right off the top of your head, but this is the way electronics work. This is the way electricity works. When you now have a nice steady flow and the amp is getting all the things that it needs, all the little electrical, you know, widgets that it needs, then it always runs cooler in that scenario than when it does when it's starving for power, because it's having to work way harder to keep that dampening factor where it needs to be, and it's working way harder to keep the capacitors full of power, because when you hit the kick, you know, that exhausts the capacitors. So the amount of time that it takes for those capacitors to recharge is extremely important. So reason number one for not running into a power conditioner is because you're limiting the amount of power that you're giving to your amp. And then the other thing is these manufacturers are just saying, you don't need to do that. We have thought all that stuff out. You know, I have predominantly Crown power amps in all my rigs, and especially on front of house. I might run some other, you know, cheaper amps or whatever on monitors, but front of house is 99.999% of the time is going to be Crown power. I have a lot of those macro 5000i Crown amps. I love those amps. They work great. They're just enough power to do what my stuff needs to do, because my speakers are very efficient. They don't need gigantic power. And they're just small enough to where I don't have to have them on a 30 amp circuit all the time. I can run them on 20 amp circuits without a problem. That's the way they're made to be run. So if you're running your amps through a power conditioner of some kind, stop it. Just stop it, dude. Stop doing that. Start plugging your amps directly into the wall, and you'll find that your system will breathe a lot better. So we mentioned brownout earlier, so let's talk about that for a second. We all know what a blackout is. A blackout is when the power shuts off and the lights go out. Okay, well, a brownout is where the power is just, it's falling below the voltage level that it needs to be efficient and responsive and dynamic. When you're browning out, you're hitting up against the ceiling of what that circuit is giving you, and it will not allow you to get any louder. I'll give you an example. I was doing a show with a good buddy of mine with Crack the Sky in Baltimore last year. We were in a city park in Bel Air, Maryland, and that city park had its own power wired to the pavilion that we were at. I had contacted them earlier in the week and told them that we needed at least one 50 amp outlet there, and we could work with the red. They had a whole bunch. They probably had 8 or 10 20 amp circuits on that thing. So we get there, you know, they had done all that. Of course, I ended up having to pull the 50 amp back apart because they didn't tighten the terminals down on the plug. And when the plug was in the box upside down, so I pulled the plug out to reorient it in the correct manner, and the wires fell out of the back of it. And the wires were hot, you know, so that was, I got a nice little jolt to my eye teeth, you know, from it. So we cut the circuit. I really didn't expect I should have cut the circuit before I tore the box apart. I know that was pretty elementary there, but we were in a hurry. And I'm thinking, I'll pull this thing out, spin it around, put it back in the box, bam, we're done. I didn't expect to have to reinstall the whole freaking plug, you know, and all that jazz. Anyways, we get all that done, we get everything hooked up, we get the bands going, and we're getting massive brownout, you know. So what we ended up speculating to be the case in that scenario was Keith, the house guy for Crack the Sky, had actually been in the green room, which was in, like, the stage was here in front of us. Way back behind us over here on the other side of the park is where they had the green room for the band. And he was over there while the opening band was on. I was mixing in the opening band, the opening two bands, actually. And he came back right before Crack the Sky took the stage and was like, man, that leg of power is on the same leg of power as the green room, as that building over there, because every time you hit the kick, our lights are dimming over there. So we're like, oh, dear Jesus. So what probably is going on there is they probably ran one 50 amp leg to that pavilion thinking, hey, it's a pavilion in a city park. Why would we ever need more than 50 amps here? Well, you know, when you decide to throw concerts in your city park, well, then you're going to need a lot more power, you know. So what was happening was we were browning out. So every time we would go to like try to push the kick up a little bit more than, you know, the comfort zone just for impact, or there was one point where there was a little bass solo going on. We were trying to pull that up. It was not getting any louder. And the reason it wasn't getting any louder is because we were tapping out what AC power was available to the power or the amp rack, you know, to amp farm there. That's a brownout. That's a brownout. You know, I've been in a lot of club situations where we were browning out, and the mix just sounded flat. It just didn't have near the fidelity that it should have had. And no matter what you do, it just doesn't get better. Man, when you're in them situations, excuse me, I just had lunch. When we're in those situations, all we can do is just make the best of it. You know, if people come to me and complain that it's kind of flat, I'm like, yeah, I agree. I hear it too. You know, but we're kind of at the mercy of the amount of electricity the club gives us. The absolute worst clubs that I have noticed to struggle with these sort of things are dock bars. Dock bars are bars that are situated on the water. It could be a riverway, it could be the bay. We do a lot of work around the Chesapeake Bay and the Potomac River, Middle River. Essex is full of all kinds of dock bars and stuff. Southern Maryland's full of dock bars. Bars that, you know, are places where you can come dock your boat, walk up the pier, go into the club, see a band, have dinner, have a good time, get back on your boat and go back where you came from, you know. Some of those clubs are yacht clubs just because they got deep water canals and bigger boats are docking. They're still a dock bar, but, you know, for whatever reason, man, a lot of those clubs have been there for 1,000 years, and they were built 1,000 years ago, and they just kind of gypsy built on top of it, meaning that, you know, here's the core structure that they originally built in like the 50s, and then they built this little section on after that in the 70s, and then they built this back section where they have the bands now in the 80s, and then they put this big outdoor area in the 90s. So every time they had a new construction project, they didn't really upgrade the power in the place. They just added more circuits to their existing power or tied into existing power that was already there, not adding more circuits. And that's the kind of dirty, nasty power that you have. I carry a bunch of, I'm trying to look here. I don't think I have one here close by. It's probably in the truck, but I carry a little like $9 AC tester. It's a little yellow device that you can put, I think some of mine are orange with an LED screen on it, so you can actually see exactly how much voltage is coming out of that receptacle. But it's basically a receptacle tester. At least get the ones that have the dummy lights on it, so to tell you if the thing is safe to plug into or not. If you have an open ground, or if the ground and the neutral are reversed somehow and the phase is backwards, that's going to do all kinds of goofy stuff to your rig. Now, you might be able to plug your lighting into that. So like if I find a questionable, like if it says that the hot and the neutral are backwards, I'll plug my light rig into that, because lighting really, it doesn't really matter, you know, at least in that scenario. You know, if it has an open ground, I probably wouldn't plug anything into it. But yeah, if I have a question on a circuit, I'll plug lighting into it. You know, I don't plug audio into it. Lighting can tolerate a whole lot more nonsense and has way less power requirements, especially in the modern day of LED stuff, than what audio does. You know, audio will tolerate a bunch of low voltage and you can get through a show and it's all fine and good. It's not great, it's not optimal, but you'll live to fight another day. Video, on the other hand, does not like any of that stuff. Video needs 120, you know, 115, you know, volts minimum. Most of them are 118, 120 minimums. And I have seen guys, I was on a corporate gig a couple years ago where a guy burned up a whole 20-foot LED wall plugging into what the facility, manager had told him was clean power. And he plugged into that thing, and the whole wall went up. It was bad, dude. It was bad. It was not good at all, and I felt for the guy. I was working audio on the gig. I was an A1 on the gig, and it's just, man, it was tough, guys. It was tough to see that sort of thing happen. Video does not like any of that sort of thing. And the other thing that doesn't like it is a lot of this new digital stuff. A lot of these digital guitar, modelers like the Kemper, the Fractal, was the Head Rush is another one. The Line 6 Helix, see a lot of those. They don't brown out. They either work or they don't work. If you're lucky, the screen will go blank and it'll still work and pass signal and do what you want it to do. You just can't see what patch you're on. On others, they'll just completely shut down altogether. So having correct power on stage is absolutely, imperative. A lot of that digital stuff is not storing a bunch of power on tap. It's not like the tube days where, if you had enough power to get those tubes full of electricity and get them glowing, you were good, man. And I mean, those amps would really, in some cases, tolerate some nonsense. Some of them did not, but at least you had stored power on tap, for a little bit of fluctuation in the AC power, if that's what was going on at the venue. So yeah, try to get on 3 different walls in the club, carry a lot of 12 gauge extension cord, okay? In my A-rig, I'm gonna say, excluding the 150 foot of 25 footers that I have that I just run around the stage, and the 8 or 10 power strips that I plug into those just to run around the stage power, excluding that, I probably still have in the A-rig right now every bit of 400 feet worth of 12 gauge extension cord. Yeah, I know that rig has 300s, probably more than that. That rig has 300 footers, 350s, so there's 450. And then again, like I said, that's not counting the probably 150 feet that I have of 25 footers that we can run around the stage and, run to, the amp rack if we need to, or to a control rack. And I buy all my extension cords with a triple tap on the end of them. So one end plugs into the wall, the other end has 3 receptacles made into the cable. That really, really saves you from having to carry those big quad boxes around that so many pro touring guys carry around. Of course, a lot of those guys are using 10 gauge wiring. It's a whole different game in pro touring, But I see some guys in the middle market using those big clumsy things, and it's like, they're just awkward and in the way. They never want to set in the cable trunks right and all that. I started buying these triple taps, and man, it has been an absolute godsend. So if you go to, Amazon or eBay, either one, and just search 12 gauge triple tap extension cords, black. I always buy black cables. When I see a band with a bunch of orange and yellow cables, I'm like, these guys are, come on, dude. That you look like you're on a construction site, not at a show. It doesn't cost anything extra to buy them in black, and black disappears. Black doesn't show up in all the social media pictures that are going to be taken for the evening and for the event. Just buy black cables. If you do that, you'll find those cables. You'll find exactly what I'm talking about. Some of them have clear ends on them with a little LED in them, which are nice, especially in the dark, because when you plug it in, you got power at the other end of it because it's lit up. So that's nice, But again, I would carry a receptacle tester around with you. You can get them for like $8 or $9 on Amazon, and test every receptacle before you plug anything into it and see where the power is and what the power is. The church I work at down in Gaithersburg, they have all kinds of scary stuff going on in that place. They got open grounds here and there, and they got a buzz in the live stream they've been trying to chase down, and it's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. The power is jacked in this place, gut it and start over. I don't know what, I don't know. The place has been there since the 60s, so somebody needs to do something to upgrade the power in the place in order to fix some of the problems we've had there. I've gotten 98.7% of the buzz and the hum out of the audio system now, but we still have, a little bit of a hum in the live stream, and that whole video booth, I know, is being powered off a circuit that is polluted. I've told them that, they just got to kind of figure out what they're going to do about it, I'm not an electrician, so, take everything I say with a grain of salt. Here is your disclaimer, I'm an idiot, but I've been in this business a long time. I have made almost all my own power distros. I rebuilt that one. Down here on the floor behind it is a big single phase with L1430 breakouts and all kinds of stuff. I understand the basic fundamentals of electricity and have for many, many years. Back in the 80s, when we went into a club, all the sound systems in the 80s were nowhere near as efficient as what they are nowadays. Like you take those old, we had that video about PV that everybody likes so much. You take a PVCS 800, man, you need to put that thing on its own. Most of the circuits in those days were 15 amps, not 20. That thing would eat a 15 amp circuit for breakfast, just one of them. And if you're carrying, 8 of them, because that's what you need for front of house and monitors, nobody was in-ear monitors in the 80s, you know what I mean? You had to carry a distro, which meant in most cases we were going to the kitchen of the club, pulling feeder cable back here and wiring directly into their house power, like at the breaker box. So I kind of came up in that sort of world. So I understand basic electronics, electricity and all that kind of stuff. But I am not an electrician. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt and don't go kill yourself, because electricity will absolutely kill you. I seen a guy one time who was trying to wire into a club back in the 80s. He was trying to wire in 220, ended up coming out 440 and blew up half the light rig as soon as you fired it up. Let that sink in for a second. And that's back when we were using static fixtures, way, way before LED. Each one of those 400 watt bulbs was like, I don't know, $250 or $300, $400 a piece. He blew like 12 of them like that. Pop, 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 pop. That's how it went. Luckily, we didn't have the downstage trees plugged in yet. So we didn't lose those. We were able to provide, downstage wash lighting for the gig and got through the gig. But the guy that owned the system was not a happy camper that day, But I digress. That was the 80s. So that's kind of the power thing. I carry at least a 50 amp distro with me all the time. Usually when we're doing festivals, we run off about 100 amps. We really just don't need any more than 100 amps. So I'll ask them to give us 250s, or I'll rent a 45K generator to do, to get 250s. You can actually get 350s out of that generator. And a lot of people say, well, that's way too much power, man. You don't need a 45 kilowatt generator. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I could probably get by with a 26K easily, But here's the thing. What I have discovered in my area of the Mid-Atlantic is if I rent, there's two good reasons why I rent the bigger generator. If I rent a 45K, number one, it's almost always available, because everybody rents the daylights out of those 26Ks. And the problem with that is the 26Ks tend to have a lot more miles on them. They're a lot more beat up, and they're nowhere near as nice of a generator as what the 45K is. The other thing is the 45K has a big enough fuel tank in it to where I can go do a 4-day festival without having to refuel it. I can fill it up on the way to the gig or top it off on the way to the gig. It will run the whole festival, 8-10 hours a day, every day. And at the end of the festival, I fill it up before I take it back. Convenience has value, guys. It really does. Convenience has value. I'm still running all single phase distros. Probably going to buy a 3-phase next year. I don't really need one because the single phase gets it done for me. We're not really drawing that much power. The equipment nowadays is so much more efficient than what it was back in the 80s and 90s. You just don't need a whole boatload of power. So I don't struggle with, I can run 2 single phase distros, off that generator, that 45K generator, and buddy, it's butter all weekend long. And man, talk about headroom. I got headroom. And the generator doesn't use near as much fuel because we're barely making it work. So I'm saving money in fuel, saving in the convenience of not having to, fuel the generator up every day. There's nothing worse. They always bury the generator somewhere behind a bunch of porta-johns or something like that, so that it's away from the stage and you don't smell the fumes and you can't hear it running. So then you got to dig the thing out every day to go find fuel for it, or carry, 20, 5-gallon, jugs of, well, not 20, but you know what I'm saying, 4 or 5-gallon jugs of diesel fuel, back to fill the thing up, and then that's a freaking mess. No thanks, dude. I'll pay the extra, $200 and get the generator that has way less miles on it, is in way better shape, has a bigger fuel tank on it, all the things that's an old man trick. It's an old man trick. And the reality of it is I'm passing the expense on to the client anyways. So I'm not screwing them. I'm giving them even more confidence in what we're able to do, because that 45K generator is built for murder. We're never going to hurt that thing. We're never going to overdrive it. We're never going to be in a situation where, we got a generator with 1,000 hours on it. But the 45Ks typically have a third of the hours on them than what the 26Ks do. So just over my span of renting generators and owning my own generators, I have a 23K gasoline generator back here in the shop that the motor locked up on me. It was a Westinghouse, generator. I didn't have it a year and the motor locked up on me. I'm probably going to pull it down and put another motor on it over the winter, but generators are a whole nother thing, man. And you want to make sure that you're getting inverters, so the power is correct and it's not dirty and nasty and fluctuating all over the place. Most modern generators are made that way anyways, unless you're buying some kind of Chinese junk or something. But it's the same way with distros, power distros. I see a bunch of guys buying these Chinese power distros, and it's like, man, you really want to put your confidence in a Chinese product? I don't know, man. I mean, when it comes to stuff like that, I just seen a video today. If you follow me on Facebook, I post a lot of videos from Central America, down in the Caribbean, over in Europe, mainly South America, Central America, Mexico, stuff like that. And they're just live sound disasters. Their stages collapsing and things like that. And I've seen a company on there, and those companies buy Chinese stuff exclusively. They have stock in Alibaba. They're buying stuff off Alibaba all the freaking time. And I'm looking at this power distro that's on fire. This is in the middle of a concert, guys. It's on fire. They have amp farm plugged into this thing, looks like a 3-phase something other, and it was on fire. And they were there trying to get everything unplugged out of it, and get it in a place where they can get fire extinguishers on it and stuff. And I'm sitting there looking at that and they rolled the roll case out, the lids that go on the roll case that was made in the power distro, and it's got Chinese writing all over it. Wow. I mean, if that's really how you want to, run your business, man, you do you, boo. I'm not gonna get mad at you because it ain't my problem. It ain't my circus, ain't my monkey. I'm not gonna worry about it. You do what you feel like you need to do, and I want to buy stuff that either I made and I know the integrity of the distro itself, or it's UL listed. It's something that's been tested, it's been torture tested, and it has been through the ringer, and you can depend on it, and it's not going to burn down your gig. God forbid if something like that happens in a club. You know what I'm saying? Now, you may have a situation where the club catches on fire, and people see these kind of videos and hear me make statements like that, and they think I'm being ridiculous. And they think I'm telling stories and being overcautious and all that kind of stuff and everything. But I'm telling you right now, I have seen these things happen. I seen a CS800 one time catch on fire. Catch on fire. I seen flames come out of the back of it. We put the fire out, and we still use the other half of the amp for years after that. So that goes to say something about the quality of those old CS800s. But it happens, man. When you're driving stuff hard, and you gotta really watch yourself, man. The way you're driving things. And I got, a buddy of mine just did this outdoor show the other day with his indoor QSC rig. And I warned him. I said, listen, man, there's no better way to destroy your gear than to take a little single 18 stick rig out to the local fairgrounds and do a gig. And, you're 75 feet away from the stage, and you're trying to get some sound pressure out of it, thinking everything's all good. And then at the end of the freaking gig, you realize you blew a sub, or you burn up a plate amplifier or something like that. I mean, all that stuff matters, man. It just does. It matters. And, you know, if you're going to work efficiently in this business, that stuff is expensive enough. We have enough problems to deal with without stupidity kicking us in the rear end. And then you got Murphy's Law to deal with, where if there's something that could go wrong, it will go wrong. You know, we are constantly dealing with stuff like that. That's why we build redundancy into all of our stuff. And I think I did a video last year on redundancy, and I may revisit that and do another one moving forward. But redundancy is super huge. That means having backup. Having backup. Have a backup distro, have a backup mixer, have a backup amp. I carry, man, in my A-rig that I'm running around the clubs with, and that's the same amp rack that I use for festival stuff. I have twice as many amps there than I really need on the club stuff, and then I'm using all those amplifiers for the festival stuff. But the benefit of being passive is if one amp goes out, I can always finagle around. I still have 2 more amp channels open that I'm not using. That puts redundancy in place. That puts redundancy in my systems. Same thing with cables. I carry a lot more cables than I really need. You know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I know a guy that has been running around for the last 2.5 decades with a rig where he has, their band is all ears. He has 2 power amps. He has one runs his subs and one runs his tops. That's it. He carries nothing else. There's no redundancy in that system whatsoever. And he's had situations where he's lost a sub amp, you know, and had to run tops and bottoms off his top amp. And that gives you a less than desirable result, but we were able to get through the night that way. But there's just not enough redundancy there. He should have at least 1 extra amp the size of his sub amp just sitting in the rack. Buy one used somewhere, you know, or something like that, just to put it in the rack, just so if stuff goes wrong, because stuff will go wrong. Listen, CLP Audio and Staging goes crazy out of our way to keep up with our systems, to maintain our systems, and to not have issues. But you're going to have issues. This is like, you know, racing cars. Like if you're going to have a race car and race it every weekend at the local drag strip, you're going to break it. It's only a matter of time. And you can do everything in your power to take care of that race car and to love it and to try to forecast any problems that could happen with it at the track so you don't have those problems at the track, and it's still going to break. It's just the way the world works. Audio is the same way. Stuff is gonna fail. This stuff is not made to last forever, you know? And if you got gear that's 10, 15, 20 years old, you know, like I do in some cases, then I've got to make sure that I'm going through that gear at the shop before I go to the gig. But even with that in place, I can show up and a piece of gear that's 5 years old might take a dump. That's just the way it is. So I try to build redundancy into all my systems and have backup for everything. And yeah, so there's that. Power is very important. I see guys, you know, especially with these plastic box rigs, which you hear me say that a lot. I'm not hating on plastic boxes. It's just not my preferred way to do business. It's not my preferred way to mix. I would much rather have wooden boxes. I would much rather have passive boxes, less cabling to run. I got better control over it, you know, through the system processor and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not hating on anybody with plastic boxes. I got a couple plastic boxes right there. There's 2 pair of Mackie SRM 450s right there. They go out of my shop once, maybe twice a year. I've got one client that insists on this little powered rig. That's what he wants, and he pays decent money, and I'm all about making clients happy. He's like, don't go dragging a bunch of amp racks and stuff into my gigs. We don't need all that. We just need a small little reinforcement rig. It'll be fine. And it works. It works for what he does. So I do have some of it in my, you know, in my inventory. But I've seen guys run, you know, the tops, the subs, everything off of one circuit. That may or may not be okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, how's the system responding? You know, if you're struggling to get your system to have that dynamic fidelity that you're looking for and that you desire, look at how you're running power. At least separate the subs from the tops. Get the subs on one circuit, get the tops on another circuit, and just kind of go from there, you know? and you'll probably find that your system will come right to life, and you'll have all kinds of dynamic fidelity that will make your system sound 1,000 times better. I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.